I'm here with David Rubenstein, co-founder of Carlyle Group, one of the biggest private equity firms. Thanks for joining me, David.
My pleasure to be here.
Could you please talk a little bit about your outlook for the economy and for the markets over the next few years?
Sure. The United States has typically had recessions every 7 years or so. We haven't had one for 8 years, so there was a concern in the United States that perhaps we were slowing down. But I think that concern is now abated because I think people feel that the new administration, the new Congress, is likely to stimulate the economy and push any slowdown or recession down the road a bit. So I think people have a pretty optimistic view on where growth is going to be, unemployment, and inflation and other things that are important in the next year or so. So I'm reasonably optimistic about the economy.
Are there things you are concerned about, like, for example, trade and the trade policies of the incoming administration?
Well, there has been a decline in global trade before the new administration came in. It's been going down for quite some time, and I do have a concern that global trade will be reduced. I think global trade is generally good for the United States. Remember, we're only 5% of the population in the world, so we really need to trade with other people if we're really going to grow our economy. So while globalization has had a bad name, I'd say, in some circles, I actually think globalization has done a good thing for the United States, but those of us who have benefited from it have to do a much better job of educating people about why it's good for us and also for them.
And are you optimistic that if you do that, we'll continue on the present course?
Well, there's no doubt there's a lot of bad things that have been said about globalization, and therefore it's not overnight going to be changed by some people making some speeches. It's going to take some time, and we need some evidence that globalization is helping the middle class and the blue-collar workers. But I do think in time we can do a better job of educating people about the value of globalization to the United States.
Okay, now focus the lens a little bit. How, and focus on the private equity business, please. How do you see the new administration affecting your business?
Well, the new administration hasn't defined all of its policies yet. They've said in general outlines what they want to do, and the devil's always in the details. Legislation takes a long time to come through. So I've reminded people that in the Reagan years and the George W. Bush years, the new tax legislation that they each sought took about 9 months to get done. So it's not as if in the first month President Trump can get his tax legislation through Congress. The tax bill and the tax cuts that we expect will probably take 9 or 10 months. In that period of time, there'll be some uncertainty. When they do come into effect, I think that'll be good for the economy.
How about how carried interest is handled?
Well, we don't know how that's going to be handled. Everything will be dealt with in a comprehensive format, so I just don't know how that will be handled.
What about deal making? Do you think the new administration is going to be friendly toward deal making, especially ones that include potentially job cuts?
Well, nobody's in favor of job cuts, so I don't think anybody's going to be supportive of that. But no doubt, I think the administration is trying to deregulate things that were regulated perhaps excessively before. That'll be helpful to job creation, in my view, and also be helpful to deal making. I think you'll see a fair number of deals. I do think that there's a fair amount of credit there, and there's a fair amount of dry powder on the sidelines, and I think you'll probably see a fair amount of activity in the M&A market, yes.
Including private equity, which has been in the doldrums more or less for the last several years.
Well, I wouldn't call it in the doldrums. We have returned more money to our investors than we invested the last 5 years, but still we've been returning a lot of money, and that's good, and I wouldn't say it's in the doldrums. I would say it hasn't been doing as many deals as maybe some of us would prefer, but I do think you'll see more deal making in the next couple of years.